Welcome to Conversations with Healers, a podcast and video interview series that features intimate, soulful, and cozy conversations with self-healers and healers. Healer to healer, we dive into all aspects of self-healing and healing and being and becoming a healer. I am Damla Aktekin. I'm a healer and the host of this podcast, and I can't wait for you to listen to this conversation. If you are new to this podcast, please take a moment to subscribe so that you can be aware of new episodes. I also invite you to visit adropofom.com, adropofom.com, where I share a lot of free resources for self-healing and healing, and you can take a free quiz to find out what your energetic wounds are and how they may show up in your life. Discovering what your wounds are is the first step in healing them. I hope you enjoy this episode. There is one more thing I would like to share with you before you listen to this episode. I created a wonderful container to help you process the collective trauma of the pandemic and begin to heal your energetic wounds. It is an energy healing membership called Chakra Bliss Vault. Every month, you will receive 3 new crystal healing sessions, plus you'll immediately have access to my entire energy healing recording library when you sign up. The membership is really affordable and will continue to be so. You can find out more about it at adropofom.com, adropofom.com. I invite you to make your healing a priority and invest in your well-being by becoming a Chakra Bliss Vault member. Hello, everyone. This is Damla Aktekin with A Drop of Om, and I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. And I have here with me Cody Edner, a spiritual teacher, intuitive reader, medium, and healer with over 35 years experience. Cody is also the founder of intuitivevision.net and the co-host of the Energy Matters podcast and Academy for Intuitive Training. So Cody, welcome, and how are you?
Oh, thank you so much. So happy to be here, Damla. I'm great. I am great. I'm in the high country of Colorado, trying to stay warm, I guess we could say.
Yeah, same here. I'm in New Hampshire and it's been snowing beautifully. Snow.
Yes, so lovely.
So I want to hear your story in, like, I'm sure you've told it a million times, but it's new to me, new to our listeners. Like, in big brush strokes, what led you to being and becoming an intuitive healer?
Yeah, boy, where to start? And I have told this story, in numerous different ways, because there's kind of lessons in how we all arrived at being awakened to our abilities or connecting with them or starting to get in touch with that part of ourselves. For me, it happened fairly young. And I don't know that in the beginning it was so much about being a healer as just exploring the kind of metaphysical energy experiences and things that can happen. So getting connected or open to intuitive impressions or impressions from spirit even was an interest of mine. And I happened to grow up in a household that was kind of into metaphysics. So we didn't really shy away from and this would have been back in the 70s. So there was a lot of books around about channeling and different energy awakening and astrology. So it's pretty open to that side of the world from a very young age. Not that I was really pursuing it, but what happened to me when I was about 14, I was out for a day with my aunt, and she was kind of my crazy aunt, the one that like was much more eccentric and loved to go out and do things and try new things. And we were at a bookstore, and this would have been, gosh, probably in 78 or 9. And this was up in Idaho, of all places. I grew up in Northern California, but she lived up in the Boise Valley. So we were at a bookstore, and it just happened that at the upstairs area of the bookstore, there was a psychic reader. And so my aunt said, "Do you want to get a psychic reading?" And I said, "Yeah, that would be really cool." So we went up there, and we talked to the reader. We were set to get a reading. And then it kind of turned out that my aunt really wanted a reading too. So she went first, and I got to sit and watch her reading. And so as the reader started to read, my aunt would ask a question, and I would have the answer come into my head. And then the reader would give that answer. And after that happened a couple times, I'm like, huh, this is really easy. I could do this. And it really didn't strike me a- as abnormal that I was able to just see and interpret and have the same information come up into my head. Um, as the reader, being 14, it was like, well, of course I could do this. But I didn't really realize that most people maybe can't or wouldn't necessarily have that same experience right off. But what happened was by being in that energy, I kind of matched it, and it awakened that thing in me. And I basically was reading alongside with this reader. And I got my reading, which I don't really remember much of, although I found the tape, a decade later and listened to it. And by then I was running an intuitive school at the age of 24. Um, and and it struck me that, one, she was a really good reader, and she was a palm reader. But the information and just kind of what she had said to me, when I was 14, I was like, wow, she was a really good reader. But what struck me was at the end of the reading, when she said, "Do you have any questions?" Um, I said, my only question was, how do I develop my psychic abilities? And she really didn't have an answer for me, because to her, her abilities were a gift, and they just happened to her. And she didn't know how they happened to her. So she didn't really have a clear answer for how you start to develop your own psychic abilities and go deeper into that world with a practice. And as luck would have it, about 4 years later, I found an intuitive school. I happened to walk into an intuitive school to get a reading, and they had an answer to that question, because they had energy awareness, development and tools for that, and ways to interact with other people on that same path, which helps us to open up, a way to create a safe space for opening up, because that's very important. Because mostly, if you're intuitive or a healer, you're also very sensitive. Like, those, you can't separate those things, because your sensitivity is the avenue through which you get your intuitive information or connect enough with someone's energy to be a healer relative to them. So it's really important that the space for intuitive development is kind of grounded and safe for someone to open up that part of themselves. So that's what I've been pursuing ever since. And like you say, that 35, that was in 1984. So I don't even know how many years ago that was now. Yeah, it was a while ago.
I know, I was 5 at that
You were
point.
5? Ah, yeah, that was the 84 was when I stumbled into the intuitive training school and got my first reading from an intuitive reader that was also a healer. The funny thing about uh, psychic readings or intuitive readings and energy work is, most people I know, you remember the first there's a couple of, like, you remember your first reading, basically. Not so much the words that were said necessarily or what you were told, but the experience. And so the second thing that really kind of got me involved in wanting to pursue and learn this was that really that second reading where the reader read me just looking at my aura, reading the colors, reading the energy, which was fine. I mean, it's always fun to get read and looked at. But at the end, he said, "Would you like a healing?" And I said, "Sure." And I had no idea what a healing was really at that point. I had explored ideas of meditation. I, read books about channeling, where they might bring forth information. Tried different forms of meditation, but the concept of like healing, where a healer might do something, I just hadn't really pursued. And so I said, "Sure." And he kind of raised his hand up. He had his eyes closed. When we read, we do with our eyes closed, just to cut out all the distractions of. Also, it's unnerving uh, to sit in front of someone and, like, if you're being read, to have the person stare at you for 2 hours or an hour and a half. So we usually keep our eyes closed. Um, but he raised his hand up and he kind of just went like this. And as he did, I felt this rush of energy up through the front of my body, something I'd never felt before in myself. And I saw this flash of colors, like a really just explosion of blues and whites and just really um, vibrant colors that, I'd never really had that in my head in that way before. So there was this sensation and this just awakening of colors. And in that moment, I just kind of thought, wow, I need to learn how to do this on myself. Like I need to, and that's where I really got hooked, to come back and learn and take the time that it takes to learn. It's more of a pursuit of a path than a one-off thing, to learn to really deeply get in touch with your intuitive
Yeah.
side and exercise it. So that was probably the bigger trigger. I mean, both of them were big, because both of them, in a way, both of those experiences kind of validated something in me I didn't know was really there. I mean, I hoped, I was interested, but I had no experience to validate that hope. And I had that feeling that I was sensitive in it, but I didn't have the language or the experience to back up the feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm noticing and loving about your story is that it seems to me that you were like gently pulled towards a particular direction. You were gently pulled to that first reading and then gently pulled to that second reading, versus my story and a lot of healers that I talk to, we hit a wall. There's no
Yes.
escape through the wall, and then you have to find, ways to either like quantumly make yourself go through the wall, or
Absolutely.
I love the gentleness in your story. I also want to remind our listeners that you actually, it's part of what you do is you train other intuitive readers. Can you
Yes.
tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, and that's primarily what I do at this point in my career. I basically learned these tools, developed myself as an intuitive starting in like 1984-ish. Um, and I basically have been doing this work full time probably since 1988. I think I had a real job maybe twice, a couple of years in my life. So mostly I've been teaching and healing. And and so there are a number of different aspects to the teaching that are valuable. And I teach people all the way up to very advanced levels of working with their energy and intuitive abilities, as well as just how to meditate, how to sit down and start to become aware of what your own energy is and how to move energy through the body, how to ground yourself and get centered and clear energy out that maybe has affected you. Because I think one of the big things that we start to awaken to in ourselves, for those of us that are healers or intuitives, is really just how sensitive we are, how easy it is to take on an energy that's not ours and end up kind of trying to solve that energy or fix it or even make sense of it. And if it's not ours, very often we can't. We cannot process it through our bodies. So learning how to know what your own energy space is, what your own boundaries are, given your sensitivities, how to separate from an energy that you might take on as a healer, how to release that. Like all of those tools are foundational to what we teach. And those are just as important as going any deeper. Like getting to that awareness of starting to be sensitive to and take care of your own energy and your own space and your own energy health through a little bit of meditation and a little bit of awareness. That's where everybody begins in what we do. You know, it's funny. I do consider myself lucky that I didn't necessarily have that awakening moment later in life. So at age 14, it just kind of it's almost like this was what I was here to do, and I couldn't get away from it because it just kept showing up. And I just happened to be lucky. But as a teacher, most people that come to me, it is because they hit a point in their life where they are having a spiritual crisis, right? They're kind of hitting a wall. They've done everything right that society told them, and they still don't feel fulfilled in any way, or that they're even that engaged in the game anymore, right? I had this one teacher, but also colleague years ago, and I thought she had a great way of describing her awakening moment as a mother. And she was a nurse. She was a lovely lady. She was a nurse and a mother of two, and she was addressing an audience at an open house one night. And she said, um, I was doing all the things right. I was a mother of two. I was a nurse. I had a husband. We had our life, and I woke up one morning dreading what having to cook dinner that night, and I knew I had to change something. And she started to look, and that change for her was her inner development of the spiritual side of herself, and she pursued that and became a wonderful teacher and guide for many many people. So we hit those points, and we oftentimes can override them or distract ourselves, but then they just come back worse the next time. So it's like it keeps getting louder and louder until we kind of turn inward and say, what is this in me that is really kind of screaming for attention and that needs to be addressed? And many times it is this sensitive, intuitive, psychic side of ourselves. Um, so, so yes, we offer a space for people to come in online these days. Back when I did it, there was nothing over the phone or online. You had to show up at a place and mingle around with people, and it was pretty difficult sometimes to get to a place, right? And so now everybody has access, and that's so wonderful. We have people all around the world calling into our classes that are offered live. We do them over a phone conferencing system rather than Zoom, um, because it's easier to kind of move people around and do things with this system. Um, we do have some Zoom events and different things, so we can get together, but a lot of the work is on the phone. Um, so they are live and or recorded. You don't have to always be there live. We try to make it as accessible as possible. And the journey to really becoming an intuitive and the way that we pursue it is really learning how to express that part of yourself, to actually read energy of someone else at one point. You get to that level, to heal and move energy, to work with guides, even to heal energy and heal yourself. Um, so there's maybe two foundational ideas that we have in all the work, and one is that uh, you're always healing yourself as you work, because as a sensitive healer, if you're not, you get stuck pretty quick, and it becomes way too difficult to try to heal someone else if you're just carrying the load. So you burn out really, really quick. So there's certainly a thread of always learning about how to take care of your energy, heal yourself as you develop and open up. Um, and the other one that we try to, which helps with that, I mean, there's really a number of different things, but one of them is we try to have fun and do it in a little bit of amusement, because most of us did get there through some form of crisis or pain, right? That this ability had turned on, and we were having a hard time handling the world, handling the situations that came into us as healers. And one of the best ways to get a little space and a little bit of perspective relative to something going on energetically is a little bit of levity or amusement, because it's a higher frequency. And so even if we just have to kind of chuckle at ourselves a little bit for how we got into this situation, we try to have a little amusement and a little fun. Um, I think one of the best lines one of my teachers would often say is, look, we got to have fun doing what we're doing, and if we can't, then we got to have fun. Well, he would say enjoy. So we got to enjoy doing what we're doing, and if we can't, then enjoy not enjoying it. Right? It's like really throw yourself into life and enjoy all of it, because that's just what's the other option?
Mhm.
Shut down and disengage. So that is the practice: how to be really fully present, kind of enjoying the experience, but also starting to really create what you want in life. Yeah.
That I like that. For me, my crisis was actually I became a mom in 2012, and
Uh-huh.
all too encompassing and
Yes.
wrote up all the things. And prior to that, I feel like that was necessary for me because I was living in a left brain world with a lot of left brain actions and existence, and I needed to have the other part, my intuition, integrated in. Um, because
Yeah.
all of my left brain solutions weren't working, like I had to go look for answers elsewhere in another.
Yes.
I needed to find another way of, like, not just existing in the intuitive brain either, like finding some sort of balance between the two. Which
Yes.
brings me to I want to ask you, because you've been a teacher and a guide in helping people develop their intuitive abilities, what sorts of differences or similarities do you see between men and women when
Mm.
it comes to
Yeah.
stepping into their intuition and awakening their intuition?
Sure. Yeah. I want to step back on you here though, real quick, because so many people come to this kind of work having become a mom, because and I don't know that this is the total answer, but certainly one of them is that very often our children come here to teach us something, and they come in a new vibration that forces us to do that next thing that will help them. And that's the beautiful thing about having a child. And so, my daughter now is um 19. She's actually taking some of our intuitive courses, and she grew up around this stuff. But she probably taught me more than, anybody ever could, right? That's kind of what that does. And so I think that in childbirth, or in that time of um having a child, there's a the the spirit of the child is around us, right? So it's like the veil between worlds is a little thinner around death and around birth. And if you are around those things and experience them, you can't help but start to notice that there's something more going on. There's something bigger. There's something sacred that we're touching at those times. I mean, there's other times certainly in life where that sacredness is there, and certainly we could seek to find and foster that every day. I mean, that's I think the practice of meditation is turning inward to touch the sacred, to open up to the divine. But something as dramatic as childbirth brings that out in the whole family, but very often in the mother more so because it's so direct. It's funny when you said that. It made me think. One of the reasons that I, as a youngster, uh, and my whole family kind of got into energy awareness and learned the meditation tools. My sister became an intuitive. She's a year and a half younger than I was. When I was about 10, my mother got pregnant again. And the baby being, we call them, the baby that was going to come in, showed up so strongly before she even knew she was pregnant, showed up beside her bed and said, "I'm here," that so strongly that she jumped over my father to the other side of the bed. It scared her so bad. And he's my brother, who became my brother, this entity, or him, before having a body, kept showing up and talking to her. And it was so profound that she started to explore where to get information about that, where to get readings. And and then when he came in, um, he was such a psychic child that part of not only me pursuing to learn about it, there was a pursuit for the whole family about how to handle his sensitivity, because he was so sensitive that, like, going to school, kindergarten, he would come home and talk about the energy from all the other kids, and he ultimately, like, he would be sick 3 out of 5 days, like, he couldn't go to school. And we finally found a psychic healer that worked on him and helped him manage his psychic power ability so that he could just handle going to school. I mean, as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, not like he didn't want to go because he was a teenager. I mean, like, he couldn't handle the energy of the kids around him. Yeah. Um, so anyway, just that just brought all that up when you said becoming a mother was so profound. Um, and now I forgot your question.
We're getting there. This is a good path. I was asking about differences and similarities between.
Oh, men and women. Yes. Um, there are certainly some differences. I think the thing that I would have to say in prefacing, before I talk about male and female energies, because there are differences. So I think we can't lose sight of the fact that we are more similar than different. We're all human, right? And we are all souls that, in my belief, have incarnated into both types of bodies, have had many incarnations. So we as a soul are not one or the other. We choose to have an experience for a purpose, a reason. And maybe our challenge is to find that purpose and that reason, what it is we're here to give to the world, but it's something. Even if it's a child. I mean, I have taught many, many people, but I cannot say that my sole purpose wasn't to give it this particular child to the world, right? I do not know. Um, but we are different. And it's interesting, over the years having done energy work, one of the big differences is in the energy working community, it's probably 70 to 80% women. And when I was teaching as a director of a center, that was roughly the numbers. It was always 70 to 80% women. And you say, well, why is that? And I think it's a couple things. One is when we start to talk about this part of ourselves, we do have to say, well, you're sensitive. And it's much more permissible for a woman to be sensitive and get in touch with that in herself than a man. Um, I think the other thing is it's a pretty common phrase to say, oh, well, it's her female intuition. So you already have this idea of you're the intuitive one and the man is the other side of whatever that is. And so an intuitive school will tend to attract people who can already identify with that a little bit in themselves. So it's always been women who say, yeah, I have all these intuitions and, nobody believes me or whatever their situation might be. Um, and for a man, it's a little bit harder. And so those are differences in terms of awakening that we often see where it's maybe a different in interest, but I think it's more of a difference in permission that we're given. So I think we do a real disservice to young men, young boys, when we kind of push down their sensitivity or invalidate their sensitivity in some way and don't really draw it out and realize that being sensitive is a human quality, not a male or female quality. Um, but there is a difference in the energetics of male and female energy. That said, we have both in us. We are not one or the other, and each person has their own balance of their own male and female energy that they run in, and there are as many different balances as there are people in the world, right? We each get to be unique in that and find our way. We do offer, or in the past, we do offer classes that kind of speak to how a man's energy works in his body and that how a woman's energy works in her body so that they can internally as they go inward to meditate work their own energies because they work a little differently. Um, it, and any internal exploration is ultimately about finding out who you really are, right? So any direction inward or any comment about male or female energy is very generalized, and then you go inward and see, well, how's this work in me? How does this feel in me? But there are some very general, fairly common ways that energy works differently in male and female bodies. There's some very common uh, kind of energetic anatomy things like the chakras and everything, we all have, and energy flows a particular way that's mostly true to everybody. So we kind of practice how to flow energy in accordance with those natural things, which I'm sure you're well aware of. I mean, as a healer, you would kind of know, you start to get a sense of how energy flows and when it's blocked or flowing incorrectly in someone, and you realign it and healing happens. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing to explore. Yeah.
It is, and it's for me, it keeps evolving and changing.
Hmm.
And I tell people, like, every time you meet me, I'm going to be a different healer because I'm
Yes.
also evolving. I'm, getting inspired by other people that I look up to, or getting inspired by art, by a lot of times by my clients. Someone
Hmm.
would come to me with a particular issue, and then I'd be like, okay, let me research this deeper in me and outside of me. Let's see where this takes us. Which brings me to I want to touch upon meditation a little bit. For me, it has been an invaluable tool
Yes.
to not only deepen my intuition, but definitely my self awareness so that I
Yes.
I can begin to catch all the good stuff
Yes.
that is coming up before it turns into a boulder or a huge rock. And
That is such a great way to say that. Yes.
but I want to
Yes.
ask you, like, what has been your experience in terms of um, having meditation as a practice to work with your intuitive awareness and seeing other people dive into meditation to bring out their intuitive awareness?
Yes. Um, Meditation, I think, is central. I mean, you don't have to meditate to be psychic, and there's plenty of psychics and mediums out there that got there a different way. I can't say that that first psychic I went to, who it was just a gift for her, meditated. I don't know that she had a practice like that. But in my mind, meditation is central to connecting with your energy, to getting kind of stronger in your intuitive awareness, um, to validating kind of the spiritual connection within, and like you say, to catching those things that are coming up before we dramatize them and make something of them in our life, right? If we can catch them as they're arising in us as some old conditioning or some old fear or insecurity that's going to cause a problem, and if we address them internally and they never manifest in our life, we just did ourselves a big favor. Um, because I think through this kind of pursuit and meditation, I mean, what is the goal? There's perhaps many different goals, but certainly one of them is just to make one's life better. And we certainly can make it worse. We know that. So these are some tools to try to start to consciously make things better for ourselves, and catching those old wounds or blocks or harsh energies, or even energies that aren't ours, as they arise before they kind of come out and cause a conflict or something to fall apart. No better thing we can do for ourselves, I don't think. So meditation, there's so many different kinds. Um, the very first time I tried to meditate as a young, like 14-year-old, I think after I got my first reading, I got a cassette tape um, that had a chakra meditation on it, and I laid down and I put the tape in, and I tried my hardest, to make something happen, and concentrated so hard. Well, even to the point of like tensing up because I didn't know what to do. Um, well, come to find out, those are all the wrong things to do to meditate, right? But I was 14, it's like, oh, you got to try real hard to do things. Um, so, learning some tools or learning some things to focus on are very helpful. We encourage people to meditate, to get grounded and centered and focus on the energy side of themselves. Um, like a half hour a day would be a wonderful amount of time. Y- when you start, maybe 5 or 10 minutes is all you can sit there. And so it is like a muscle that you build up. And then you start to get to a place where you can comfortably sit longer and stay focused and stay kind of in the energy of what you're kind of working on. Um, it takes about, once you get over about 20 minutes, I think it takes about 20 minutes usually to get through the clutter of the day and the mind. And suddenly, once you can break past that barrier, suddenly the meditation becomes something very different. And there's a stillness that can be found, or a certain energy feeling that can be achieved, or an awareness that opens up. So we like to encourage people to sit like a half an hour or work up to that, and then it becomes longer. Then when you've discovered that place, it becomes easier to sit for an extra 10 minutes, and suddenly you're sitting for an hour if you have the time to do it. And it becomes a very powerful thing at that point. And at some point, you kind of take the time off of it. It's not a thing you have to sit for a certain amount of time, or a discipline you enforce on yourself, like you might exercise, like I have to exercise for a half hour or whatever it is. But it becomes a thing that you want to get to a certain place in yourself, and then you're done. And sometimes that takes 40 minutes, and some days that could take an hour and a half if you had a rough, it depends on what's going on in your life. So suddenly meditation becomes a kind of a relative or a relationship with your life to meditation. So when I know that I'm struggling, I meditate longer to refine myself, because life is a struggle at times. But I don't want to go through life in the struggle. I want to find my space and heal myself so I can tackle the struggle from amusement, or an effortless space, or at least a spiritually minded space. Um, so then meditation becomes more of a give and take with life, of how long I need to get where I need to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. To me, it's like a touch point. Like I
Hmm.
need to know
Yeah.
that I need to touch that part of me, or that existence of me that can hold me, the vibrational me in the sea of the vibration. I need to get in
Yes.
touch with that, so that when I get back to the daily life, it's a little bit easier. And I know
Hmm.
that there's something more that exists as I'm washing the dishes,
Yes.
which I don't
Yes.
I don't always enjoy. But
Yeah.
I mean,
It's
putting them in the
it.
dishwasher.
Yeah, it's funny because one of there's a couple of resistance points we have to meditation, which are dissimilar to exercise. Sometimes we have to break through a wall of resistance to get to doing something that just takes a little bit of attention and focus. Um, and so one of them is I don't have enough time, that we can come up very often in people's lives are so busy. And there's this old saying in meditation that you should meditate a half an hour a day, but if you are overwhelmed and you don't have enough time, then you should meditate an hour that day, right? And it's funny, if you actually do that, suddenly your day opens up in a different way and everything falls into place. But it's very difficult to do that when you feel like you don't have enough time. um, and I think what I've discovered over the years is that partly the reason that things open up if you do sit and meditate when you're overwhelmed and you feel like you don't have enough time to get everything done, and then you meditate and suddenly everything gets done, um, is because it's not actually time that we don't have enough of often. It's space, inner space. When everything's pressed in against us all at once, it feels overwhelming and like I can't do it all because I'm experiencing it all in this moment. And my energy is trying to do something about it all in this moment. And when I sit down and meditate, what I'm partly really doing is creating space within myself for and separation, let's say, from the world, from the pressure. And once I have that, then things can flow in a way where what needs to happen happens, and it's effortless. And it's a hard thing to get to, but that's the power I think that I have found in meditation, is suddenly life becomes a little bit less effortful and more in sync or in flow, and things fall into place in ways you couldn't imagine. I think they call that like synchronicities start to happen. Yeah.
And to me, what you're defining is how I define healing, which is to be okay with what was, what is, and what can be. And meditation can certainly help you get there in a way. I mean, if you
Mhm.
have deep
Yes.
roots, definitely you need more specific help. But in terms of maintenance and then deepening your
Mhm.
healing journey yourself, I feel like it's definitely the top thing
Yes.
to add to
Yes. And I think what you just said is an important point to remind people of, because it's easy to get kind of into meditation, into the healing journey, and think I have to do this myself. But we don't go through life in that way. We interact all the time, and it's the same in your spiritual life. Yes, there's a time to go within and meditate and discover things about yourself and come to know yourself. And there's a time to interact with other like-minded, spiritually aware people and receive healing. And ultimately, you'll give healing as well. You can't help but become that healer that you are, or that insightful person. You'll end up sharing that with the world. But the world and life is an interactive game. And so the idea of going off to the cave to meditate for 30 years to discover yourself, it really is not true to how it happens. uh, these days, we're through what we do, we're learning how to live in the world, um, in a better way, in a more productive way and creative way. Yeah, that would be our goal anyways. Yeah.
So we've been talking about meditation. I want to bring it back to intuition. I want to ask you, what do you feel is healing about intuition? Whether it's you receiving information about your life or reading for another person, what is healing to you and others about intuition?
Yeah, I think that partly so one of the words we use is, it's kind of where we say hello to spirit. Now, maybe to unpack that word, it's recognizing and validating the truth of who you are. So most of our stuck points or ills, or even our traumas, especially our traumas, separated somewhere where we're separated from ourselves. So an intuitive insight is where you see the lie of that, and behind that is the truth of who you are, which is hard to put into words. It's more of an experience, or something in yourself, of the true divinity, or the true energy of who you are as a soul or a spirit, that you're something bigger, that you're something more, that there's this inherent value in the human being that should be recognized amongst all of us, between all of us. The notion of namaste, which some interpret as like, the God in me sees the God in you, or the light in me sees the light in you. That's just a word, but if you sit down with someone and intuitively connect with them, that suddenly becomes a reality. I actually am seeing that in you, that is the light or the God, and I'm saying, this is you. This other thing where you think you're not good enough, that's not you. That's someone else's fear that was put into you, or someone else's insecurity or competition that was put into you. Let's move that out and bring out this true you. And that moment when that happens is so powerful. But on both sides, it's just as powerful for the reader to suddenly be with, or the healer to suddenly be with someone and see beyond the ego, the layer of lies, the fears, the human condition, to our true self. Um, well, it's so powerful that that's what I've done for 30 some odd years. Yeah.
And continue to do.
Yes.
So that's beautiful. I want to ask you, is there anything else you wish to share with our listeners, or just say whatever is coming up right now
Yeah.
before we...
Well, I would say, we've been kind of talking at some of the deeper levels that one can get to. Um, I would say that just start somewhere if this is a place of interest. Just to close our eyes and get grounded or centered or touch the sacred within us for 5 minutes will change our day. And that we all just have to start where we're at in connecting with and discovering this part of ourselves. And to keep it really simple is better, because the mind and the world we live in, sure, more complicated gets us an iPhone, or gets us a Tesla. But in the spiritual world, simpler the better, because it's just about going inward to connect with ourselves. And the more we complicate that, the harder it becomes. So even simply just centering with an intention on our breath can be a powerful shift that it creates. And sure, there's always more to pursue and learn if there's interest. You have to find the thing that you're interested in. You know, the way I have a way of teaching it, and some tools and a specific kind of space of teaching about intuition, but that's not for everybody. But spirituality is for everybody because everybody is a spirit in a body, or is a spirit having a human experience. So you have to find the thing that you're drawn to, that works for you, that feels safe, and then let that evolve, because that will grow, and maybe a different thing comes along later that answers that question. Um, there's a saying. I did martial arts, and there's a saying around being a black belt, and it's just that a black belt is just a white belt who didn't quit. Right? It's not a special person. It's just someone who showed up and did it every day. And that's the same with a psychic reader or healer. It's just someone that started exploring and practicing and meditating a little bit, and did it long enough that suddenly they that part of themselves awakened and came out, and they could start to use it. Yeah.
And for
So,
me, I just want to add to that. For me, the piece that made my intuition stronger was the intention.
mhm.
I intended to listen to it. And not only that, I asked to receive it at a level where I could be of help and of service. So
Yes.
that intention changed everything. So finding what your intention is.
Yes, it's so powerful. And I think the other thing you just said, asking the question, asking is it's like intention. You kind of define your intention, which is what we would teach as setting the energy, setting the tone or the frequency for something, and then asking, which is the opening yourself up to receive it. And you have to do both of those things. And I mean, that right there is a simple practice for 5 or 10 minutes every morning could change your life. Yeah.
Beautiful. So thank you so, so much, Cody. I just want to
Thank you.
um, ask you where can, and I will include the links below, but can you tell us a little bit about where can people find you and your work? I know you mentioned your trainings. Um,
Yeah, but probably the simplest place to find us to begin with is on our show, our podcast. And I say ours, David Gandelman and myself host a show called Energy Matters. And so that's at Energy Matters podcast.com. I think it might be at Energy Matters Academy.com now. And that's where you would find information about our courses as well. And that's probably the simplest way to get connected with us and get linked into us. We each have our own uh, websites and our own things that we're teaching, so you could explore both of us from there, though. Yeah.
yeah. So my understanding is that at Energy Matters Academy, you're offering certain levels of courses, not only about
Yes.
meditation, but also about intuitive development. But you also have your private practice where you see people.
Right. You can find us through there. And so we have our private practice. We have different things that we do and teach separate from that, that you can explore as well. Yes.
I'll include links to that. This has been such a pleasure, Cody. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to Conversations with Healers. If this episode spoke to you in any way, please leave a review or comment, like or love it, and share it with others in your life. This is a true soul love project from my heart to yours. I really appreciate your help in spreading the word. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and check out other episodes to listen to some extraordinary healing stories and advice. Have a beautiful and wonderful day.